Humans are inherently ignorant, and this ignorance is what leads to the massive stupidity and dumbfuckery I see in our societies today. And when I say people are stupid, I'm referring to everyone, even the so-called elites and intellectuals that run society. You see, these so-called elites and intellectuals like to present themselves as people who know all and understand all. But if you were to closely observe and examine these so-called leaders of society, you'll soon discover that these people don't know everything, and you'll also discover that these elites are just as ignorant as the rest of the people. Their level of ignorance might be lower than most ordinary and average people, but ultimately they are just as ignorant as the rest of the people. And not only are these elites and intellectuals just as ignorant and just as stupid as the rest of the ordinary and average people, but they are also extremely terrified of them. I mean, think about it for a second. Imagine you are at the top of a society and everyone worships and deifies you, but in reality, you are maybe just another slightly above average person who got lucky enough to rise to the top of a society. A society, keep in mind, that can at any time riot, revolt, and rebel against you in order to overthrow you. Wouldn't you also be terrified of the people's wrath? I'm betting yeah, you would. So, let's get back to this inherent ignorance in people and its effects on all of society. You see, most if not all human beings are born ignorant, and this ignorance is what leads to questions like, who are we and where are we going? Who is God and what is the universe? What plan or purpose does the universe or God have for us? And these types of questions lead humans to search for answers in wicked, questionable, nonsensical things like other ignorant people, material things like items and objects, ideas or concepts, situations or phenomenons. And the end result of this ignorance and search for answers is that people end up idolizing and rationalizing wicked, questionable, nonsensical things. And you can see examples of this in today's world where people are idolizing certain wicked, questionable, and nonsensical things like dumb-fuckingly stupid celebrities, trends, influencers, politicians, priests, and presidents. You name it, and the dumb-fuckingly moronic and ignorant people will follow it. All because of their inherent ignorance and search for answers. And these slightly above elites and intellectuals are kind of aware of this inherent ignorance in people, and they do their best to exploit and take advantage of it. And one of the methods they use to exploit and manipulate this inherent ignorance in people is called cognitive warfare. Cognitive warfare is described as the weaponization of brain sciences. This new method involves hacking the individual by exploiting the vulnerabilities of the human brain in order to implement more sophisticated social engineering. This war on the mind is being waged by governments and their military and intelligence agencies, Fortune 500 companies like media and entertainment companies, banks, tech companies, and think tanks. Oh, and me too. I'm also waging this cognitive war on people's minds for your information. But this is not about me. This is actually about these other guys like governments and their intelligence agencies, organizations like NATO and their World Economic Forum, mainstream media, investment banks, hedge funds, and so on and so forth. Anyway, enough about me. Let's talk more about cognitive warfare. Okay, so not so long ago, I was watching some video lecture series about the concept of social safety, made by a Russian general by the name of Konstantin Petrov. And in one of these video lectures, he talks about the 6 priorities of governance over humanity. And these 6 priorities are methodological priority, chronological priority, ideological priority, economic priority, genetic priority, and military priority. So, according to this Russian general, the first three priorities, where you control and influence a person's cognitive functions, like their thoughts and actions, are the most important priorities if you want to totally dominate people. And according to a NATO research paper from 2021, the human mind is the new battlefield of the 21st century, where there will be a contest or fight for the control and influence of human minds by NATO and its enemies. In other words, NATO and its ops are going to be waging cognitive wars on everyone. It doesn't matter if it's their own people or the people of their enemies. This cognitive war will be waged on the minds of children, teenagers, young adults, and old people. Basically everyone. And some of the mediums or platforms that they will be using to wage this cognitive war on the mind are TV and mainstream media, the internet and social media, schools and institutions, governments and their people. Oh, and I'll also be there, mostly in the shadows, waging my own cognitive wars on governments and their institutions, or whatever else I feel like waging a cognitive war on. So what I'm basically saying here is, anything that has cognitive functions will have a cognitive war waged on it, even animals. Alright, jokes aside, what kind of tools and mechanisms will be used to wage this cognitive war on people? Well, if I'm going to be waging a war on people's minds, one of the strategies I would use is an unrelenting attack on the critical thinking faculties of those minds. Why, you might ask? Because the last thing I need is critical thinking people who think for themselves, make up their own minds, and ask tough, thought-provoking questions. I don't need that. What I need is uncritical thinking people who only think what they are told to think and question nothing except what they are told to question. And some of the mechanisms or tools I would use to do this are propaganda, economic warfare, information warfare, psychological warfare, and cyber warfare. And distractions. Lots and lots of distractions to dumb people down so that they lack focus and don't critically think or ask tough, thought-provoking questions. Now, attacking people's critical thinking capabilities is not enough. There will always be some people who notice things and ask questions. And this noticing and questioning leads to awareness, which then encourages people to unite and form resistance groups and movements in order to rebel against the entities and systems that are waging this cognitive war on them. And so, if you are NATO or any of these other entities that are waging this cognitive war on people's minds, what are the best ways to deal with this threat of awareness? Well, in my opinion, the best way to deal with this threat of awareness is to divert people's attention from the real issues that are affecting them to unimportant, insignificant issues, ideas, and theories that turn them against each other and against their own government. And that's where the concept of divide and conquer comes in. One of the best ways to divide and conquer people is to divide them on the basis of ideology like gender ideology, race ideology, religious ideology, and political ideology. If people are divided based on these different ideologies, it gets easier for these shadowy entities like NATO and its allies and enemies to continue with their cognitive warfare operations on each other and on their own people in an effort to gain control on human thoughts and actions. Another way to use cognitive war to divide people and governments is to take advantage of the socio-economic issues that are faced by that government, like inequality, crime, and corruption. For example, if a government or state is governing over a country with overwhelmingly high levels of crime, corruption, and inequality, you can bet that the majority of people in that country are not happy with their leaders and their style of governance. And this unhappiness and dissatisfaction with the leaders of the country can be exploited by cognitive warfare tactics like attacking the critical thinking capabilities of those people and then divide and conquer them by using mind weapons like ideological warfare, cyber warfare, and psychological warfare to promote and entice anti-government sentiments and turn people against their own government to promote and incite protests, resistance movements, rebellions, and riots. And the end result will be a complete destabilization of that country, which will then force a regime change. Once you've diminished the people's critical thinking capabilities and divided and conquered them, you'll be left with a dumbed down, divided, low morale and submissive population. The people of this country will be reduced to a gullible, childlike state where they'll be manipulated into giving their freedom and independence to government. The people will be reduced to subordinate and irresponsible citizens that allow government to take control of their lives and make decisions on their behalf. These dumbed down, gullible, subordinate, irresponsible citizens will be further manipulated into giving their right to privacy and freedom of speech to the government and the corporations that will impose and enforce mass surveillance on the people and turn the country into a police state. And this mass surveillance police state will make it even easier for the government and their militaries to wage cognitive wars on the minds of their own people and the minds of their enemies. The end result, or the end game, is a techno-feudal world run by technocrats and tech oligarchs